Remember, directors are working with what they have to tell a story, and of course the most important, the one that we always know, is the script, right? That's the story on the outside that we're all aware of, and then of course there's the subtext, which is the meaning below the meaning, which we've discussed. So we have the script and what potentially could be the meaning. Then of course we have all of the audio and the visuals, right? So when we talk about the visuals, one of the main things we talked about were all of the shots. We've talked about the long shot and the close-up and the shot reverse shot and panning and tracking. We've talked about all the angles, high angle, low angle, right? And we've talked about the lighting, the side lighting and bottom lighting. Well, montage has to do with what you do with those shots. Now, there are a lot of great videos on several of these aspects of montage, and I'm going to include a few of them in this lecture, so you can see them down below, and you should definitely watch them. I'm going to refer to a couple of them, and they will be part of quizzes that you'll have to do, so I just want to make sure that you watch those as well. But they are available, and they're here in the body of this lecture in Canvas, okay? Originally, montage, it's a French word, but it just means to assemble. So when we're done shooting, right, a director decides how something's going to be shot, cinematographer sets it all up, camera operator shoots the scene or the scenes, all those things, creating shots, okay? And the shot is from the time you turn the camera on till the time you turn the camera off. Then the editor assembles those shots. Now that editor is working usually in close conjunction with the director, but this is where montage or assembling comes into play, okay? So let's talk about where it started and then how it grows over time and a few of the people who are important to that growth, okay? So when we start out with the Lumiere brothers, who are basically our first filmmakers of note, they create these actualities, these non-narratives, right? And what they do is they have these long shot, I'm just going to put a LS, and they're a long take. And the reason's pretty simple. The camera's really bulky, they don't move it around very much, they don't have a kind of a zoom lens or anything, right? And they basically just run the camera exposing film until the camera runs out or the action is over, whichever one, and it just makes a long take by default. It's not really a thought of let's make this feel a certain way because we won't cut. It just is simply how they do it. They don't really have much of a thought on how the language should be, so that's how it is, okay? And then we've talked about this, but D.W. Griffith is kind of the forerunner to how to truly assemble shots in a way that is more meaningful, okay? For starters, he uses a lot of different kinds of shots, from the big establishing, extreme long shots to a lot of close-ups, right? And he has a lot of different transitions. And then the way he assembles those starts to have more meaning for the viewer, okay? So without really knowing it, he's kind of working with this idea of montage. And without knowing it, he's actually going to be really integral to one of the most important group of people when it comes to montage. His most famous film is Birth of a Nation. Again, we've talked about it. It's this incredibly racist film that's difficult to watch because the subject matter, besides being factually completely wrong, it's completely racist. And, I tend not to show it because it's incredibly uncomfortable, but it does introduce a lot of camera techniques. Now, his second film, Intolerance, critically even more acclaimed, but successful with critics, not financially, lost a lot of money for Griffith. But that film really took his abilities as an editor and working with ideas of montage and storytelling to a new level. And one of the groups of people that got really interested in the film Intolerance was the Moscow Film School. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about the Moscow Film School. We've talked about film movements and how a lot of them come out of necessity and isolation. Well, Russia, in post-World War I, is a decimated country. Many, many lives, millions of lives lost in World War I. The country is very broke. It is fairly isolated. And the film industry very slow in going. But the government is backing this film school, and inside this film school, a couple of movements are born. And one of the biggest one has to do with montage. So, the Moscow Film School does not have a lot of film stock, meaning the actual film, to go out and make films. So what they do is they work with films they already have, and they work on actually re-editing them, taking films, cutting them up, and moving parts of the film to different places, an already completed film. And the one they do the most is Griffith's Intolerance. Okay? They take this film and they re-edit it. They cut it up and move things around. And what they find is, when they move things around, that the film seems to have not only different meaning, but different emotional impact. And they realize that there is something to that. That, wait a minute, hey, the way we put different shots together can do more than just tell a story. Now, out of this, one of the most important things comes from a teacher named Kuleshov. Kuleshov works there, and he comes up with something that's called the Kuleshov effect, or Kuleshov experiment, and it's here in Canvas, so you can see it, and you will need to watch it so it makes good sense to you. But Kuleshov creates this very short piece of film. And what it is it's a person, it's a man, although it's been replicated many times. It can be a man or a woman, but it's usually a man. And he is looking at the camera, right? And cut between this man looking at the camera, we see specific images. We see a bowl of what is supposed to be appetizing soup. We see a woman who is supposed to be considered an attractive woman. We see a child in a coffin who appears to be dead. Okay? It's very, very different. If you were to see those three things, you might feel quite different based on each of them, right? If you were hungry, you would feel hungry. You might feel that you love this woman. You might feel very sad about this child. And so that's what happened. They took the picture of the man, or the film of the man, and they put the different shots in between it. What most people see, and it's pretty interesting, is how the man's face changes. How he appears to be hungry, he appears to be maybe lustful, he appears to be sad. And what most people can't believe, but it's true, is that shot of that man looking at that thing that we see, he's not really looking at it, but cut in between, is the same. It's the same each time. Except that people frequently, often, think that that shot is different. Like in this one, he looks like he's pretending to be hungry. In this one, he looks like he's pretending to be lustful. In this one, he looks like he's pretending to be sad. But it's the same shot. So how can that be? How can people see the same shot over a short period of time and be sure in their minds, even though it's incorrect, that what they're seeing is different? Well, it's because when you juxtapose or put together two different images, right? Those two images in your mind create a connection. I'll give you an easy example for this, and this has been done many times, and I'll try to find one so I can put it up on Canvas for you, but I can take a shot of a man walking down a street, right? And I can have him look around, and then I can shoot a city that is not the city where he actually is. Something that's clearly not where he is, right? Then I can have him looking this way, and then I can have a picture or a shot of a woman walking in this direction, right? But she's not on the same street. Then I can have him walking in this direction. And then I can show a shot of another city. Okay? So now I've got different cities, different people, not in the same place, but they're walking this way. And they're looking off, and then I'm shooting something. That's not where they actually are. What people have found, though, is your brain, will create a story. Like, oh, he's there, he's in this city, he sees that woman, he's walking toward that woman, and she sees him, and she's walking toward him. Even though none of that is there, right? Objectively, you could look at it and say, no, I think it looks like he's in Los Angeles, but that city is not. It looks like New York, and she's clearly somewhere else, right? But your brain puts it together, okay? Yeah, he's looking, so he must be looking at that. He's looking over there, and now we see a woman, so she must be looking at him, and they're walking in different directions on the camera, so they must be walking toward each other. You just create a story based on the images that are put together. So Kuleshov figured that out and started working with this idea of, hey, if we put two different kinds of images together, we can create some kind of meaning, okay? And it became known as montage. Montage now started to have this more elaborate meaning. And this movement became known as the Soviet montage movement, okay? There are several directors who are important during this movement. Kuleshov is one of them. The most famous, though, is Sergei Eisenstein. Now, Eisenstein loves the idea of montage. He thinks it's great. He realizes how much power it has to put two different images together. And in fact, he has a whole school of thought on what different types of montage there are. But he is most associated with what are called intellectual and ideological montage, meaning that the two images you put together give you an idea or an overall feeling or emotion about something, right? Even if those two images, in particular, if those two images don't seem to necessarily go together on their surface. I'll give you an easy example. A derogatory term that people might say for a police is a pig, okay? Or a derogatory term for a politician or a big businessman is a fat cat. That's what they call them sometimes, right? So if I showed you a picture of a businessman or shot a film with the businessman, then showed you a fat cat, right? Maybe just lying there going, right? You might say, right, in your mind, this businessman is some fat, lazy cat who's just getting fat because people are just giving it whatever, right? Or this police officer is a bad person because I have juxtaposed him with this farm animal, okay? Now, you don't necessarily have to agree with that, any of that, but when those two images come together, your brain starts to create a connection, okay? Intellectual or ideological or even emotional. And sometimes you don't even notice it, but it is there, okay? It is intended to do this thing to your brain, right? Now, it's not the only kind of montage, and there's a nice little lecture that I have found, and I'm going to put it here because the lecturer has really good little clips, so I'm going to put it below. But there are 5 main types of montage, but the other one I want to make sure that you fully understand has to do with, it's called a rhythmic montage. So rhythmic montage means that the shots you are putting together are of different lengths, okay? And because of that, you are creating a rhythm. See, most film doesn't go with an 8-second shot, and then you cut it, and then it's an 8-second shot, and an 8-second shot. If you do that endlessly, it starts to get monotonous. If you wanted to build up tension for something, you could start with a longer shot, and then a shorter shot, and then shorter, and then soon it's just one after the other. And the rhythm you are creating, right, is making something more intense.